Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Revolutionaries. Today, our very first guest is State Representative from the 88th District, Josh Elliott. Josh is running for the gubernatorial nomination from the Democratic Party in the primary this year in Connecticut against the incumbent Governor Ned Lamont. Josh, thank you for coming on to our show. It's really great for you to be here for our very first interview on the Revolutionaries. So,
Thanks for having me,
tell
buddy.
us about yourself.
Good being here. Sure.
Tell us about yourself. Give us a little bit of who is Josh Elliott?
Grew up in Guilford, went to college in Ithaca, and graduated with a degree in sociology, and then ended up working on my first political campaign in 2009 because it was Obama who got me first interested in politics. And then I was in Virginia for a year, and we got crushed in the Tea Party year. And I moved back to Connecticut, moved back to Hamden, where I went to law school at Quinnipiac and started taking over the family business. And then a few years later, ended up getting involved in the Sanders campaign, active and engaged as a volunteer. After that campaign ended, I was approached by the Working Families Party to run for office. So that's when I openly announced against the sitting Speaker of the House and pushed him into early retirement. And then ended up running against basically the entire establishment and won 60-40 and started the Progressive Caucus in my first term and Tax Equity Caucus 2 terms ago. I've chaired the Higher Education Committee for a term, and I've been Deputy Speaker, Caucus Co-Chair, and Screening Chair for a couple terms now, and that's about it. And now I'm running for governor.
Nice. Well, we're glad that you are. We're glad that you're kind of giving a voice to many people out there that feel like they haven't been listened to very much over the last couple of years. So, if we were to take a look at what illustrates the differences between your vision and Governor Lamont's vision for the future of Connecticut, what would you say is kind of a couple of different points for that? As far as what you stand for, what he stands for, what you see the future looking like.
Right. I generally tend to stray away from titles, from labels, but if anything, I consider myself an economic populist. That we have a tax structure that is backwards. So the more money you make in our state, the less you pay as a percentage of your income to state and local taxes. And that's because Connecticut is the second most reliant state in the country on the property tax, which is a middle class wealth tax. And so I've been talking about this for years. And the statistic that I use is that the top 4,500 income earners in our state pay less than 8% of their income to state and local taxes, and the bottom 1.2 million pay over 20%. And it is this disparity that cements generational wealth. And given that our governor is someone who makes $55 million a year from passive generational banking income and has spent $70 million of his own money to ultimately buy this seat, he is the person who's holding up any talk of tax reform. And he wants to sort of wave his hand and say that he gave the biggest middle class tax cut that the state's ever seen. And while he's talking about the income tax and very marginal breaks at the different income levels for working families, he blithely ignores the fact that we are historically starving our municipalities, which means that when they're trying to just fund their education system, they're ratcheting up the property tax. So we have seen over the last 8 years how people's property taxes are skyrocketing. That is 100% because of Ned Lamont. It is one person and one person alone. The Democratic Party is ready to move on this. It is the governor who knows that ultimately will be asking the wealthy to pay their fair share, and he does not want to see that. So that is the biggest difference between us, I would say.
Yeah, we've seen it actually in our local governmental areas, whether it's in municipalities themselves or if it's the school districts. The budgets are very strained, and obviously we need to address that. Is there any kind of ideas that you have and how we can go about addressing that more specifically, like any kind of relief in terms of state assistance to municipalities or to school districts, increasing ECS so it's not just once but something that adjusts over time?
Yeah. So the ECS grant is the education cost sharing grant, and it is one of a few different ways that the state sends money back to municipalities. It does it through the ECS formula, it does it through pilot, which stands for payment in lieu of taxes. That is when you have a base of non taxable property like universities or government buildings or religious institutions or hospitals or whatever the case may be. And the state recognized that this can be a burden on the town if the town can't tax that property. Then the state is on the hook for some of it, not a ton of it, but some of it. And so the way that we can get to a better tax system is by doing something similar to what Massachusetts just did a few years ago. And they asked the public through ballot initiative whether or not the public wanted the wealthy to pay more so that they would be able to fund their education system more equitably. And they implemented a 4% surcharge on people making $1 million or more. And they expected about $2.2 billion over a 2 year period. They took in closer to 5.7. And with that money, they invested in their education system, something our governor has been refusing to do. They've been investing in a fully refundable and permanent child tax credit, something that our governor has been unwilling to do for the last few years. And the sole reason that this dies, we're the only state in the Northeast that doesn't have this. He's been the person who's killing universal free school meals. And while he, during an election year, is okay with breakfast, that's not enough. We need to make sure that our kids aren't going hungry during the school year. And then not only that, they being Massachusetts, are also investing heavily in their physical infrastructure, something that we just really don't see enough of here in Connecticut. We're actually divesting from rail, and we don't have the big highway projects that we need to be doing to be a 21st century transportation network. So there's a lot of things that we need to do here in Connecticut, and with this governor, we just can't get these things done.
Yeah, I was in terms of infrastructure. That is obviously also another big issue because we have some deteriorated roads, particularly in our highways. We get a ton of traffic that comes in from out of state. A lot of commercial traffic that comes in from out of state, particularly along I-95, and the burden is on us to keep that up. While you have large traffic jams, you have really only two routes into New York with the Merritt Parkway and I-95. You can get there through 84, but that's a little bit further north. And again, you still have the same problems there where you have traffic issues. So those are things that we do actually have to address. Let's talk about
Hmm.
energy. As you know, that's something that's important to me. A lot of voters have talked about it. When I ran for state senate a couple of years ago, I found that by far the biggest issue that voters kept talking about was Eversource and the cost of energy. And our party platform now
Hmm.
actually includes this in it. If I quote, we encourage the development of true public utility authorities, whether by expanding the model deployed in communities around the state or by a state authority that coordinates these efforts. Uh, is this something that you agree with? And secondly, if you do, how would you go about implementing such a thing?
Yeah. So this is something that I've been talking about frequently. The couple of things that people talk a ton about, to your point, and I'm hearing it as well, is energy and housing costs. And so what Ryan Fazio is doing, who is the Republican nominee, is talking about the public benefits charge and how that is what is driving up the cost. And it's certainly a part of the bill, but it's not, to me, what's driving up the cost. What's driving up the cost are more profits for the utilities than we've ever seen. And the only reason the profits can operate the way that they do as a monopoly is because we, as state actors, allow them to act as a monopoly. And so they being UI and Eversource, have taken it for granted that they will have this monopoly. They can do whatever they want, and they can raise their costs whenever they want. And we've seen them have record profits, I think over $1.5 billion last year. And their CEO makes 18, $19 million when you take into account bonuses, and distribution to their shareholders has doubled in the 2010s. And just over and over and over, we see these problems. And what I talk about is the fact that over the course of the US, we see about 70% of energy distribution is done through public means, and 30% is done through, 70% is private means, and 30% is through public means. And what does UI and Eversource do ultimately? They purchase energy, they maintain the grid, and they sell energy back to us. And then they make money through the ratepayers, and they get a percentage of what they have in terms of equity, in terms of their poles, and again their grid infrastructure. And so that's how they make their money. And what we see across the U.S. is places where energy is sold publicly, it is about 30 to 40% less expensive. And that is mirrored exactly here in Connecticut, in the 6 towns here in Connecticut, where energy is delivered publicly. It's 30 to 40% less. And the public benefits charge is part of that because they don't have to charge that. But it's also a lot on top of that is just what we're spending on excessive profiteering. And so a lot of what I talk about is providing for a model that allows municipalities to purchase their own grid and be able to maintain their own grid. And talk to anybody in Wallingford. I've mentioned Wallingford to their neighbor. They love their socialized energy because the fact is that the town is responsive, it's cheaper, it's reliable. So why wouldn't they love it?
Hmm.
They get what they want. And the fact is that all that
I
profit that
remember
we've
a few
built
years
in
ago we had a
that
storm
is
that
what is rising the costs.
I remember a few years ago we had a storm that came in. It was over the summer, and I don't remember which storm it was because I'm getting older, so my memory is slipping. But I do remember that it knocked out power all over the place, and EverSource and UI were struggling. It took them into some places weeks to restore some of the power. And I do remember that in Wallingford it was something like 2 days, and they were back on, and they pay less as ratepayers. They get faster service as ratepayers. Uh, I think and plus there's no profit motive. It is just let's make sure that people have electricity. Let's make sure that we provide that electricity at basically the affordable rate so that people cannot have to worry about that breaking the bank. Along with energy, healthcare, of course, is a big cost concern for a lot of families. Many families are spending, ungodly amounts of money, whether it's on the cost of the insurance itself, whether it's on the out-of-pocket deductibles, whether it's on the actual cost of care or prescriptions or what have you. And we're not really getting any movement. Certainly from the federal government, and they're trying to address that problem. There won't be anyone trying to really deal with that in any serious way for another few years at least. But in Connecticut, there may be things that we can do. Do you have policy ideas as to what you want to do to address those concerns?
Yeah, I could talk about health insurance costs for a long time. We know that the cost of care is going up because of venture capital and these lease buybacks and the interaction between the health insurance companies and our big hospitals is just not commensurate with an actual functioning market, and they just keep on ratcheting up their side. And the health insurance companies are making more profit than we've ever seen. And what I like to remind people is that this is a fairly new industry. It was an industry that didn't exist before World War II. And it was in the middle of the 20th century that health insurance companies even began to exist. And it's a broken system, and we know it's broken, and we sort of act as though there's nothing that we can do about it. And I don't really understand it, especially through the lens of over the past 8 years, seeing how multiple times the insurance committee has tried to get bills out to bring costs down. And every single time it's the governor that kills it because he's swayed by the fact that a health insurance company might leave our state. And so he's allowing himself to be held at gunpoint by these insurance companies. And the plan that I would like to see is get everybody onto the state plan and just act as one big pool, one single payer. And the way that we do that is by just slowly growing it out and starting with all municipal level workers and employees. And then you bring in all the nonprofit employees because we're paying for them anyway through these big block grants. May as well have them into the same pool. And then you start going to anybody who's hired in 1, 3, 5, 10 employee businesses and help out small business. You just keep on growing out this pool to keep on collecting people. And ultimately, we want to have everybody covered because what I say is that the flu doesn't care if you're employed or not. So we want to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy. But this is the best way I think to do it. And it was a plan that it's not mine. This was Chris Donovan 20 years ago. This is the person who, as majority leader of House Democrats, ushered forth the abolishing of the death penalty, to give you a sense of who he is. Well, when he was chair of the Public Health Committee, this is something that he had already gotten out, and he did the statewide tour. But at that time, I believe that there was a Republican governor, so he wasn't able to make much headway, and it didn't actually move. But he got it out of committee. And my feeling is, if you have a governor who's there, the legislature is certainly there. The issue right now is that we just don't have a governor who will back working families. He's just going to pack corporate America every single time, and I've just seen it over and over and over.
And I also think, I mean, you mentioned about, health insurance companies threatening to relocate out of the state. I mean,
Hmm.
I've always viewed that as being, putting a gun to the head of the citizens of the state of Connecticut and saying, listen, if you don't make us profits, we're going to pull the trigger. And I just find that to be so abhorrent that that's why we're not doing anything, that we're afraid of what a company is going to do rather than doing what's in the best interests of the people of the state of Connecticut. That's just it rubs me the wrong way. I know it rubs you the wrong way, and it rubs a whole lot of us wrong.
Yeah,
So I hope that we're able
sure.
to actually address that. Now, your strategy is for appealing to voters who may agree with your goals, and there's a lot of those in the Democratic Party, obviously, that are maybe currently supporting the governor. But they may support your overall goals, but they'll say, well, they're concerned about the costs, they're concerned about the implication of the implementation, rather. They're concerned about government effectiveness. How do you address
Mhm.
those people's concerns regarding those things?
I mean, what I say about my policies is that they are dramatically popular. And then what we are missing is somebody who's willing to say no and take on big fights against big corporate players and a lot of money and a lot of power. So these things these things are obviously popular because the governor's running on them. He runs on bringing down health
Hmm.
insurance costs and then kills it when he's in office. He runs on investing in our education system and is the sole reason that we don't get it. So he recognizes these are the things that people want. The difference between he and I is that I actually believe in these things and want to do them and want to fix them. And he is the person who, when we're up in the legislature, is the one who's protecting companies' profits. That's the difference. So I'm not worried about whether or not the public is going to be with me. The public is with me. This is we know we have a broken system, but you have to when you are dismantling a broken system, you are creating some new losers in that system, and these are the people that have had power. And when you have power, uh, you are going to fight tooth and nail so that you don't lose it, whether it's profits or whether it's a privileged position like a monopoly or whatever the case may be. And that is what you have to be really, really ready for when you get into office, that this is what you're going to be up against. And so it's, to me, offensive that the governor runs on these issues because he knows they're popular just to stay elected. That is the worst possible thing because then the public just doesn't believe that elected officials are actually acting in their best interest.
I do recall just like about a week ago or so when EverSource was announcing its the next rate increase. Um, the governor put out a statement regarding it, saying, well, this is, no good. They can't, they're putting profits above people, so on and so forth. But, and his talking about, he didn't really offer any kind of solution to it, just sort of talking about it. And I like to point out that, we already are talking about the solution to this. We just talked about it earlier here in this discussion is that, there are ways to address this, but he seems that he's reluctant to actually take that next step and say, here's what we need to do. And I think that's the difference. I think it's the reason why recent polling has showed that people ages 18 to 34 have a strong preference for you in versus to the governor, because firstly, they're in the exposed position of having to pay for a lot of these things at the beginnings of their career or while they're just getting out of school or what have you, or just starting their families. And also, they have a long time to have to deal with these costs. So, I think that the strength for what the messaging that you're putting out there is to talk about having to make these decisions, having to say status quo isn't going to work anymore. And in order to try to break away, we have to start thinking about new ways of doing things. And giving empty platitudes to these problems is not working anymore. And the response that the governor was getting in that post, by the way, basically was stating all of that. Is that okay? This is great. What are you going to do? And you've had 8 years to do something about this.
His posts,
And so
that post,
there you
by the way,
go.
that he put out was almost
Yeah,
verbatim some of my messaging from months earlier. So he recognizes this is what people actually
yeah,
want to hear. It's great. I love having him on board with
yeah,
that
and
messaging. The difference between he and I, though,
right.
is that there's no solutions. He just wants to. This mock outrage to be enough because he just wants to be liked. He doesn't want to solve a problem. He just wants to be liked and he wants to stay in the
Mhm,
position. But if you want to do this job well,
mhm,
you are going to have to piss people off. You cannot do this job well and have everybody
mhm.
be happy. That is my deep seated belief.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of what people will say regarding, the governor and, particularly obviously in the Democratic Party, but I think this is just generally because he does have a good, strong approval rating overall. And they'll say, well, he's done, a good job, especially, going back to the COVID era and everything. And that's all well and good. And you know, I can't say he's done a poor job. What I would suggest, though, is that we're facing some significant challenges coming up. We're facing them currently, but there are also major headwinds that are on the way. And the question is steady the way to go when, first of all, yeah, we have fiscal guardrails in place, we have a surplus and all that, but have we built that on the backs of our towns? Have we built that on the backs of our school districts?
We've built
A lot of the people that I talk to about this say exactly that. That the reason why all of a sudden now school districts and municipalities are under this fiscal strain is because we have taken that burden off of the state and we just transferred it to the towns to try to have to figure it all out. All right, figure it out, everybody. If we sit down for this interview 4 years from now, okay, and you're the governor of Connecticut, what do you hope Connecticut residents will say was the defining difference between your administration and Ned Lamont's?
My eye is always toward who are the winners and losers in the way that society is set up right now. And is state government making problems worse or is it fixing problems? And I would say that we have a problem right now where the lion's share of running government falls on the backs of working families. And it is nearly impossible for people to live in our state. And because of government's policies, that we are making that problem worse. The biggest difference between Ned Lamont and myself is that I know that government is basically the only tool that we have for collective action to fight for working families. Now, you have labor unions, which do great work, but you need law and you need a tax structure that helps even the scales because um, people with money are going to have a lot of power and they have a lot of say. And when you have a scenario where CEOs are now making 500 times more than their average worker, and you have just generations of wealth that is just continuing to crystallize, only government can resolve that. We need better rules, and nothing about the economy is natural. We create an economy. We make the rules of the economy, and we're less than 100 years. We're 80 years away from a system where federally top marginal tax rates were 94, 92%. They were 70% for decades. We had built a middle class, and we know what that looks like. And right now, the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old, and people are coming out of
Mhm.
undergrad with decades worth of debt. We have collectively built this economy. We have nobody to blame but ourselves. And at the same time, we can fix this anytime we want to. This is on us,
Right.
and we can choose
You
the
know,
same thing and say it's better than the alternative. But it's actually at this point not. It almost couldn't get worse. People are truly,
yeah.
truly struggling,
There's
and we're just
no
continuously
comparison.
going in the wrong
Yeah.
direction.
You mentioned something about the taxes, and I think that's an interesting point. Is that if you look at post-war, post World War II, so say for after 1945 through the 1981, let's say, when the marginal tax rates for the upper uh, income earners 1.94% was reduced in the early 60s to I think 62 or 63% off the top of my head. That was the time that the middle class was built in America. And if you want to pinpoint the point where the middle class began to deteriorate, it's exactly at the point when those marginal upper tax rates started to get severely cut around 1981, 82, that period of time. And it wasn't an immediate impact, but it began to deteriorate over a long period of time, and we're still going through that phase right now. So I agree. If you want to have effective government, you have to make sure that you overcome people's skepticism about it, about effectiveness. Having, as a person myself that's worked in very large corporations, the effectiveness in those organizations are often worse than I've seen in government. So anyone saying that, well, take a business perspective, come on, that's if you've worked in a large corporation, you're not going to believe that because they're even worse. Um,
Hmm.
Implementation is is an issue of will. It's an issue of willpower, and cost. We see it. We've seen the cost, whether it's in healthcare or energy. We can lower the cost you're paying now by using the instruments of government to do it. So I think that this is what a lot of the voters out there, and like I said, particularly the voters that are 18 to 34, the younger voters, but I would say anybody over, even under around age 50, like myself. We see the
Hmm.
challenges going forward when it comes to not just living now, but retirement. And we know we just can't keep the course we're on. That's why I think people are listening to what you have to say, and you had a real opportunity to be able to shock the world here in a couple of months. Now
Trying, working at it.
I got a couple of fun questions for you. This is the what I call my favorite segment, okay? So this is where I ask you a couple of things of what's your favorite this, that, or the other thing, and you just kind of either give me the first thing that comes to your mind or what have you. Okay. So this is just for fun. So people get to know, the things that Josh Elliott likes. So first we'll go with favorite movie.
The Matrix.
The Matrix. Okay, that's my brother's favorite movie too. Favorite TV show.
The Wire. It's so good.
Favorite book.
Never ending story.
Favorite song. This could be song or piece of music.
The General by Dispatch.
Okay. Favorite food. Now you can say whether it's a meal or as a singular food. So it might be, if it's a meal, you can put a meal, but if it's like ice cream, then you could say ice cream.
Pho from Mecha.
Well, that's good stuff. Yeah.
So
And
good.
lastly, your favorite person in history.
FDR.
I had a feeling it was going to be FDR. I was going
It's
to I
FDR.
would have I should have written it down right on my paper here. He's going to say FDR because I had a feeling that's who it was going to be. Yeah, he's up there for me
Yeah.
too. Lincoln, I
Yeah.
think Lincoln's my guy, but like he's right up there. Josh, thank you very much for your time. We wish you the best of
Yeah.
luck. Everybody, joshforconnecticut.com to go to his website. Check out his
Hmm.
platform, check out what he has to say, follow him on Facebook and on other social media. Josh, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Good being here.
All right. Take care.